Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm a 28-year-old woman who thought she had it all figured out. I met my fiancé 2 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue. He seemed perfect, charming, funny, and kind. We hit it off immediately, and within 6 months, we were living together. Everything was going great. And last year, he proposed. I was over the moon. One of the things I loved most about him was his close-knit group of friends. There were 4 of them who had been inseparable since childhood. My fiancé, his best friend, a woman I'll call Kay, and 2 other guys. Kay was different from most women I knew. She was tall, lean, with short hair, and always dressed in jeans and t-shirts. Despite her appearance, she was one of the sweetest people I'd ever met. Kay had always been openly gay, and I never felt threatened by her friendship with my fiancé. In fact, I admired their bond. The 4 of them were like siblings, always there for each other through thick and thin. I felt lucky to be welcomed into their circle. As our wedding day approached, I was excited about starting our new life together. We had been planning for months, and everything was falling into place. The wedding was just 5 weeks away when my fiancé's bachelor party weekend arrived. The group, along with 2 other friends of my fiancé, headed to a coastal town known for hosting bachelor and bachelorette parties. They had planned activities like scuba diving and kayaking, and were staying at a bed and breakfast. I wasn't worried at all. I trusted my fiancé completely, and Kay was there too. What could go wrong? The first night seemed to go fine. They had dinner at a restaurant, hit a nightclub, and went home. But the second night, that's when everything fell apart. I was woken up at 7 a.m. by a frantic knocking on my door. It was one of the guys from the group. Let's call him M. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept all night. I asked M what was going on and if everyone was okay. He replied that things weren't okay and that something bad had happened last night. He came in and sat down, his hands shaking as he told me what had transpired. Apparently, after the nightclub, they had gone back to the B&B. 2 of the guys had brought girls back with them. The rest of the group was drinking in the living room when things took a dark turn. M explained that the 2 other guys had started complaining about not going to a strip club. He said they were drunk and saying awful things about their wives. Kay had told them to be quiet because they were ruining the mood. My heart sank as M continued. The 2 guys had then decided it would be funny to see Kay naked. And to my horror, my fiancé had joined in. M described how they had stripped Kay, who was screaming. He and D, the other guy, had heard and came running. They got her away from the others and put her in a bedroom with the girls they'd brought back. Then they had a fight with the other 3. My fiancé, the man I thought I knew and loved, had participated in assaulting his childhood friend. M told me they had taken Kay to her parents' house an hour away because she was too afraid to go home. M expressed his anger, saying he didn't know what he'd do if he ever saw my fiancé again. He mentioned they were trying to convince Kay to press charges. After M left, I sat in shock for hours. My fiancé returned in the afternoon, acting as if nothing had happened. When I told him M had visited, he became nervous. My fiancé tried to downplay the incident, calling it a joke that got out of hand and begging me to believe him. I confronted him, pointing out that stripping his friend against her will was assault, not a joke. He denied this, insisting they were all drunk and that they didn't mean any harm. When I told him Kay was terrified and staying with her parents out of fear, he paled. My fiancé expressed his need to talk to Kay and explain things, mentioning she had blocked him. I told him he needed to leave immediately. He pleaded with me to understand, still insisting it was just a prank. I told him to get out, saying I couldn't even look at him. He left in tears, but I felt numb. The man I thought I knew was a stranger to me now. How could he do this to someone he'd known since childhood? Over the next few days, everything unraveled. M kept me updated on the situation. Kay had decided to go to the police, with the full support of her parents and friends. My fiancé and the other 2 guys were arrested and charged with sexual assault. The wedding was off, of course. I had to start the painful process of canceling everything and returning gifts. But that seemed trivial compared to what Kay was going through. I reached out to her, offering my support if she needed it, but understanding if she didn't want to hear from me. To my surprise, she agreed to meet me for coffee a week later. She looked tired and stressed, but there was a determination in her eyes. Kay assured me that she didn't blame me for any of this, saying that I was a victim too, in a way. I apologized for what happened to her, expressing my shock at my ex-fiance's actions. Kay admitted that she too never thought he was capable of such behavior given their long friendship. We talked for hours. She told me more details about that night, things that made me sick to my stomach, but she also told me about the overwhelming support she'd received from her family, from M&D, and from the community. My ex-fiancé tried to contact me multiple times, begging for forgiveness, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. I blocked him on everything. The last I heard, he had lost his job and was facing serious legal consequences. It's not the happy ending I once envisioned, but it's a new beginning, and for that I'm thankful. I'm a new mom, and my little boy just turned 6 months old. Being a parent is tough, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. What made it even harder was that my husband got deployed overseas right after our son was born. So, it's been just me and the baby for a while now. To keep myself sane and in shape, I've been taking martial arts classes at the local gym. I started before I got pregnant and kept it up throughout. Now I'm a black belt, which came in handy in ways I never expected. So there I was pushing my son in his stroller through the park on a sunny afternoon. We'd just finished the mommy and me yoga class, and I was feeling pretty good. The park was busy, full of families and kids playing. I stopped by a bench to grab a bottle from the diaper bag when I heard a voice behind me. I turned around to see a middle-aged woman with a Karen haircut. You know, the one, cooing at my son. She was gushing about how adorable my baby was. I smiled politely, used to people fawning over him. I thanked her and mentioned that he had just turned 6 months old. The woman seemed surprised by his size for his age and asked if she could hold him. I'm not comfortable with strangers holding my baby, so I politely declined. I explained that I don't let strangers hold him and hoped she would understand. The woman frowned and protested, saying she wasn't a stranger because she was a mother too, with 3 kids of her own. I acknowledged that was nice, but reiterated that I still didn't know her and would rather not let her hold my baby. The woman raised her voice, accusing me of being rude and criticizing young mothers these days for their unfriendliness. I ignored her and began to walk away, pushing the stroller. That's when things got crazy. This woman actually reached out and tried to grab my son from the stroller. She declared that if I wouldn't let her hold him, she'd just take him herself. My heart nearly stopped. Without thinking, I reacted. All those hours of training kicked in. I spun around, grabbed her wrist, and twisted it away from my baby. She yelped in pain and surprise, demanding that I let go of her and calling me crazy. I told her to step away from my child right now. Instead of backing off, she lunged at me. Big mistake. I sidestepped her attack, used her momentum against her, and flipped her over my hip. She landed hard on the ground, the wind knocked out of her. Gasping for air, she accused me of assaulting her and threatened to call the police. By this time, a small crowd had gathered. A few people had their phones out, recording the whole thing. An older gentleman stepped forward and announced that he had witnessed everything. He explained that the woman had tried to take the baby and that I was just defending my child. The woman struggled to her feet, red-faced and angry. She denied the witness's account, insisting that she was just being friendly and that I had attacked her. Another woman in the crowd spoke up, confirming that we all saw her try to grab the baby and questioning what she was thinking. The woman looked around, realizing she was outnumbered. She started to back away, calling everyone crazy and saying she was leaving. As she turned to go, a police officer who had been jogging through the park approached us. He asked what was going on. Several people started explaining at once. The officer held up his hand to quiet everyone down and asked to hear one account at a time. He turned to me and requested that I explain what had happened. I took a deep breath and recounted everything. The officer listened carefully, then turned to the crowd and asked if anyone else had witnessed the incident. Several people nodded and corroborated my story. The officer then approached the woman who was trying to sneak away. The officer told the woman that she needed to come with him for questioning. She sputtered in protest, insisting she hadn't done anything wrong, and that I was the one who had attacked her. The officer began to read her rights as he led her away. As the officer led the woman away, I felt my knees go weak. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the reality of what had just happened hit me. A kind elderly couple helped me sit down on a nearby bench. The elderly woman asked if I was all right, commenting on how terrifying the experience must have been. I wondered aloud who would try to take someone else's baby. The elderly man complimented me on how well I had handled myself, impressed by my moves. I managed a weak smile and thanked him, admitting that I never thought I'd have to use my martial arts training like this. My husband nearly had a heart attack when I told him what happened. He's trying to get leave to come home early now. It turned out that the woman had a history of mental health issues and had recently stopped taking her medication. She's now getting the help she needs, and I've got a restraining order just in case. I never expected to use my black belt skills to protect my baby from a would-be kidnapper, but I'm glad I had them. I started working at this company about a year ago, fresh out of college, with my computer science degree. I was excited to put my skills to use and make some friends along the way. The office seemed nice enough at first, look open plan, lots of natural light, and a pretty diverse group of people. On my first day, I tried to introduce myself to everyone, including this one guy who worked in a different department but seemed to collaborate with our team a lot. Let's call him Mr. Popular. I gave him my friendliest smile and stuck out my hand for a shake. I cheerfully introduced myself as the new guy in the software development team and expressed how nice it was to meet him. Mr. Popular just looked at my hand, gave a curt nod, and walked away. Talk about a cold shoulder. I was confused, but I figured maybe he was just having a bad day. As the weeks went by, I noticed something odd. Mr. Popular was always super nice to the women in the office, but he barely acknowledged my existence. He'd bring snacks for everyone else in my unit, but conveniently forget about me. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but it became more and more obvious. One day, I overheard a conversation between Mr. Popular and one of my female co-workers. She was apologizing to him about something. The female co-worker expressed regret for what she had said before, admitting that she shouldn't have talked badly about the new guy. Mr. Popular reassured her not to worry and asked why she had said those things. She explained that she has difficulty making friends, is shy, and sometimes being a little mean helps her open up. She acknowledged that it wasn't right. Mr. Popular told her it was okay, that he understood, and promised to keep her secret safe. This co-worker had been bad-mouthing me behind my back, and Mr. Popular had just eaten it up without even giving me a chance. No wonder he'd been treating me like I didn't exist. Things only got worse from there. Whenever Mr. Popular had information to share with our team, he'd go to my boss instead of talking to me directly. But for anyone else, he'd deliver the message personally, usually with some fancy foreign snacks in tow. The final straw came when he told me to only message him in the group chat. His tone was so condescending it made my blood boil. Mr. Popular instructed me to only message him in the group chat from now on. When I asked if there was any particular reason, he curtly told me to just do it. I was fuming, but I decided to comply maliciously. I started using the group chat to point out every single one of his mistakes. I'd send messages like pointing out how long a client had been waiting for an urgent request that usually takes just a few minutes to resolve. Or I'd mention that he had promised to take a call but left the client on hold, asking if we should transfer them to someone else. I made sure to keep my tone professional, but I knew it was getting under his skin, especially when I'd point out how he was too busy flirting with the women in the office to do his job properly. After a few days of this, Mr. Popular came stomping over to my desk, his face red with anger. He requested that I send messages for him directly to him. I just smiled sweetly and reminded him that he had been very clear about wanting all messages in the group chat, and that I was just following his instructions. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again, realizing he had no leg to stand on. He stormed off, leaving me feeling pretty satisfied. Word got around the office quickly. People started noticing Mr. Popular's preferential treatment and his habit of slacking off. Our boss called him in for a meeting, and let's just say it didn't go well for him. The next week, we had a new policy about response times and professional conduct in the office. Mr. Popular's special treatment of the women in the office became a lot less obvious, and he actually started acknowledging my existence. I won't say we became best friends or anything, but at least now I get my share of the Mexican and Japanese snacks. And more importantly, I get the respect I deserve as a coworker. Sometimes you got to stand up for yourself, even if it means being a little petty in the process. My parents, both architects, poured their hearts into designing our family home. When they passed, I inherited this masterpiece. Initially uncertain, I grew to cherish it, vowing to maintain it as a haven for those in need. That resolve was tested when unprecedented storms hit our province. As evacuations began, I opened my doors to friends, relatives, and neighbors. Among them was Aunt Kay, my mother's sister, along with her children and grandchildren. From the moment she arrived, Aunt Kay was insufferable. She complained incessantly about everything: the food, sleeping arrangements, even the house itself. One stormy day, cooped up in the living room, Aunt Kay crossed a line. On a phone call with Aunt Emma, she insulted the house, calling it a dump and a monstrosity, claiming its designer had crap for brains. That was it. I saw red. This woman had been nothing but a burden, and now she was insulting my parents' life's work. I confronted her, telling her if she didn't like it here, she could leave. Aunt Kay, shocked at my audacity, reminded me of her status as my elder. I fired back, pointing out her lack of respect for my home and my hospitality. To everyone's surprise, I handed her an umbrella and some cash, insisting she leave. Her children, stunned, remained motionless as Aunt Kay stomped out, slamming the door behind her. 5 hours later, a weak knock came at the door. There stood Aunt Kay, drenched and defeated. She apologized, admitting she couldn't find anywhere else to go. I hesitated, then remembered my parents' intention for this house to be a sanctuary. I let her in but laid down strict rules. No more complaints, no more insults. Aunt Kay agreed meekly. From that day on, she was a changed person, keeping to herself and any complaints private. As the storm subsided and people returned home, Aunt Kay approached me one last time. She thanked me for the lesson and said my parents would be proud of the person I'd become and the home I'd maintained. Watching her leave, I smiled. My parents had built more than a house. They'd created a home that could weather any storm, natural or family-induced. In honoring their memory, I'd found the strength to stand up for what's right, even in the face of a typhoon named Aunt Kay. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.